Pokemon has been a huge part of my life for over a decade, thanks in part to the games, the community, and the shows. My favorite part of the games was the battle system. It's intuitive, offers complex strategies, and interesting items to either aid in your victory or hinder yourself for a risky strategy. One such item is the Life Orb. When used with a good physical attacker, you can do some good damage, but at the cost of reducing your health. Same kind of thing goes for the move Substitute, except you lose a quarter of your health to tank a hard-hitting attack. Now, why am I telling you about this? Well, as you know, Game Freak has been introducing battle gimmicks to spice up each generation because they believe the good old battle system is too simple and boring for kids. Don't get me wrong, I like some of the gimmicks, really, but they've become a crutch for the Pokemon franchise, and they've been leaning on them for far too long. So long, in fact, that it's becoming a detriment to the system they're trying to improve.
I'm not saying I don't like gimmicks. I love gimmicks. Sometimes they can make the game better. Take, the newest Kirby game, for example. It has this new thing called Mouthful Mode, and they designed the entire game around it. What has Game Freak done with its gimmicks in more recent years? Made the game, then designed the gimmick, and then kind of molded them together to make a somewhat cohesive product. That's not how gimmicks are done. Gimmicks should be like what I just said earlier. They should be made and then make the game around it. Anyway, back on track.
Before I get into the gimmicks, let's run down Gens 1 through 5 real quick. Generation 1 started it all with weird type-dependent physical and special moves. Generation 2 introduced holding items. Generation 3 had weather and introduced the physical and special split. Gen 4 and 5 did kind of the same thing, introduced new items and abilities. Unless I missed something, and if I did, let me know. I'm not perfect. All these gens have something in common, though. They improved the system each time without massively shaking it up. Which brings us to the gimmicks. All of this started back in X and Y with the introduction of Mega Evolution. Personally, I love this gimmick. I loved finding new Mega Stones and seeing what this new Pokemon's new temporary evolution would be. Mega Evolution shook the battling community in a weird way. Some Pokemon became completely overpowered, and some offered new strategies for specific Pokemon. I'll use two examples. First one is a pretty obvious one. The most overused, overpowered Mega Rayquaza. Ray got the biggest buff and stats I've ever seen. His upgraded ability, Delta Stream, put a wrench in any weathered team's plans at winning, and with the introduction of the new move Dragon Ascent, it made him nigh indestructible. That's why he was banned from tournaments, and still is to this day. Now that so many people are using Groudon in the VGC, I worry that I'll be banned as well. But I don't think I will, because there's viable strategies against it, like using Kyogre. On the other side of things, we have Mega Garchomp. People consider Mega Garchomp to be pretty bad because of his negated speed stack when he Megas. Personally, I don't see how that's really a bad thing, since his attack stack gets upped by 40. But I guess with Sandvale active, it really doesn't matter all that much since he can tank it. The point here is, Game Freak introduced a new mechanic that tied into the existing formula, and the fans took a long time to learn the strategies and weaknesses of this feature, but in doing so, made it integral to battling in Pokemon. Next is Generation 7, Sun and Moon and Yusum. As you know, it introduced powerful type-based super moves called Z-moves. Simplistic in design and complex in execution, Z-moves weren't only big damage. They were also protect moves, weather boosters, and stat boosters if you had the right moves, or EV. Z-moves, like Mega, were baked into the story really well, better than X and Y's in my opinion. Gen 6 said that Megas came from the remnants of a huge meteorite. It's a weirdly simple explanation for it, but it works. Gen 7, however, took this idea of integrating the gimmick into the main story and expanded on it tenfold. In Sun and Moon Normal, instead of gym badges, which fans had a meltdown about, not me, I thought it was interesting that they were mixing it up. They introduced Z-crystals that you earn at the end of trials. Trials are basically gyms, but they're more themed, if that makes any sense. And at the end, instead of fighting a gym leader, you fight a huge Pokemon called Totems. Other than the trials, there really was no explanation given for the Z-Crystals. Where'd they come from? What even are the Z-Crystals? That was answered in the sequel as remake, or whatever you want to call it, Yusum. But again, the story of the origins of the gimmick isn't what this video is about. Z-moves, again, changed once again how players used moves in battles. Simpler than Mega Evolution, but still complex. Speaking of Megas, they returned as well, but the curious thing is that there weren't any new Megas introduced, which as it turns out was foreshadowing for the future. After the abysmal release of Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, we were getting hyped for the new mainline Pokemon games on Switch, Sword and Shield, Among the speculation of the games, we wondered if Megas were coming back, and what would happen with Z-moves. Well, it was answered in the E3 trailer. Megas and Z-moves were completely removed in favor of a new mechanic, Dynamaxing. Pokemon fans got rightly very upset at this. Something that had become staples of the battle system were being removed in favor of upscaling the Pokemon models. Years of strategies, teams, and memories were going to be lost to the ages because of this new gimmick. Also, the National Dex was being removed, which angered fans more, but that's a topic that literally everyone and their grandma has talked about. When the games came out, people discovered why Z-moves and Megas were removed. Dynamax replaced it with essentially the exact same thing. Dynamax, as well as making Pokemon big, gave them subtle stat boosts and super moves that affected the battle. These super moves were obviously repurposed Z-moves, and that's all well and good. The problem is that they allow you to use 3 moves instead of 1. With Z-moves, you had to strategize your one only use of the Z-Crystal. And that works because you shouldn't be able to use super moves, like, so many times. But that's what Dynamax does. There's also Gigantamaxing, which doesn't do anything extra, except giving some Pokemon a Mega-like form. Now that Dynamaxing exists and Z-moves and Megas were removed, the player base had to adapt to completely new strategies once again. And the limitation of Pokemon didn't help things either. But, again, that's another topic that everyone else has covered. I'm not gonna mention BDSP since it's literally Gen 4. After the Dynamax debacle and the DLC had released confusing me with Calyrex's blue Dynamax hue, Legends Arceus was announced. Legends Arceus completely did away with Dynamaxing, thank goodness, and introduced the Style mechanic. This, in my opinion, is the worst offender so far. Style has literally no future in the main series since it takes place in the sub-series, Legends, if it does become a series, that is. Anyway, Style has 2 different methods of attacking. You can potentially get to go 2 turns with Agile, while paying the price of a less damaging version of said move, and Strong does big damage but leaves you vulnerable for an extra turn. While granted, it is an interesting mechanic, again, the fanbase had to come up with new strategies for an all-new gimmick that we knew would be eventually scrapped in favor of some arbitrary mechanic. Hence, Scarlet and Violet's Terastallizing, which basically gives you the type-boosting items as headpieces, like the Charcoal, the Miracle Seed, and the Magnet. I can't speak for everyone, and some people like these gimmicks. If you like it, I'm glad you do. Me, however, I don't like having to adapt to some stupid alteration of Z-moves, weird extra forms for Megas, and all this other stuff. If you're gonna do another temporary mechanic, Game Freak, at least do something new instead of repurposing Z-moves for the 13th time. You know what would be a cool mechanic? That rumor from Sword and Shield speculation days of armored Pokemon. Items that would give certain Pokemon armor to significantly boost their defense and lower their speed as a trade-off for keeping things fair. Granted, that idea came from Pokemon Insurgents, but it's still a solid idea. It just doesn't have to be armor. In the end, I don't like these temporary mechanics. It forces you to focus on learning something completely new when the normal battle system was already good enough. Sure, my favoritism of Megas and Z-moves contradicts that, but since they were both in Gen 7, it seemed like a safe assumption that they were going to be mainstays going forward, only to be ripped from the series. At least there's Pokemon Showdown. Who knows, maybe Terastallizing might be a cool mechanic. You've heard the phrase, don't judge a book by its cover. Maybe we should do the same with this. Anyways, that's it for now. Like and sub or I'll move one of the Earth's plates in a way it's not supposed to.